Hi, welcome to another episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Chris Costa.
And I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
So Joanne, how can I help you today?
I'd like to learn more about partial invoicing.
Okay, sure. We can step through an example right here. First, I'm going to, of course, go into accounts receivable. And you're going to close out a job or go through the job closeout process like you would any other order. The difference, though, when you're looking into a partial invoicing, when you're highlighted on the job number, you won't actually run through the specific closeout process for the order.
Okay.
You're going to have the option to click on a partial invoice button. Okay. A lot of times you might want to get pre-bills out before the job is completed. You know, maybe there's a partial shipment. The order's for 10,000 and maybe only 1,000 is shipped. But you still want to get the invoice out for that 1,000. So the job status is still going to be in process, perhaps. So I can click on partial invoicing. You'll still get the prompt of whether or not you want to create the invoice by the job or by the separate components. Okay, so you can answer that like you normally do. And then you're going to come up to the invoice just as normal. In this case, I've already shipped 2,500, or someone in the shipping department has marked the job as 2,500 has shipped at this unit price. So in this case, this is my partial invoice. If I had multiple components and I wanted to bill one component over the other, I could delete a component and leave the component that I wanted to be on this invoice.
Okay.
I could also go in and edit the line item and make certain changes to the values here, manually adjust the quantity shipped if needed. And if you do change the values in this section here, you can use the recalc by component or recalc by job buttons to recalculate the sales distribution.
Okay.
Okay, and once you're set there, really the only thing that's triggering this to be a partial invoice is this checkbox on the bottom left that says don't post the job on the invoice to history because it's a partial invoice.
Okay.
That's really the only thing that marks it as a partial invoice.
Now, what if I want to add additional line items, like say for freight or for postage and handling?
Yep.
Can I do that?
You can absolutely do that. Really consider this nothing more than just a regular, standard, everyday invoice. So if you wanted to add handling or postage, you could absolutely add an additional line item.
Okay.
If there's a rush charge that you wanted to put on because this, this first 1,000 was shipped and you wanted to put that additional charge, you could certainly do that as well.
Okay. Well, what if I want to add other jobs to this partial invoice? Can I do that?
You could do that. The only caveat to that is those job numbers would also be included as part of the partial invoice. Keep in mind that when you mark this invoice as a partial invoice, all the job numbers that are on the invoice will get flagged as a partial and would not go to history as part of the posting of the invoice.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, what if I want to defer the revenue that I'm collecting for this until the final invoice?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you can certainly do that as well. That's actually another option right here on the lower row. Okay, right next to where you mark it as a partial invoice. You can also mark it as deferred revenue. Now that works in conjunction with a setting or a control account in the GL system options where you can mark a control account as your default deferred revenue account.
Okay.
And instead of posting, and I'll open up the line item here, if it's marked as deferred revenue, instead of posting to these sales accounts, you're actually going to post to your default revenue account temporarily while this invoice is posted. When you then do the final invoice, the system will automatically clear the deferred revenue and then capture the sales that was on this invoice.
Okay.
Okay, and that's a seamless process. Okay. Now, one thing to note here is you cannot have it set to defer revenue without the partial invoice.
Okay.
Okay, the partial invoice would have to be checked. You can do a partial invoice without deferred revenue, but you cannot do deferred revenue without the partial invoice.
Okay.
Okay, so it's sort of both in this case. Okay. Once you're satisfied here, you can click Save, just like you normally would. It'll tell you that the invoice number has been saved. You can hit OK, and of course it will take you back to this screen here. The invoice, just as any other, will land in a batch that you can review and post as necessary. Okay, and I'll go ahead and post that now.
All right. Well, now that this is posted, how do I go and find that partial invoice later on when I want to bill it?
What you would do there, and I'm going to go ahead and close out of here. If you go back to job closeout section, when you first come in here, notice that you're on the open jobs list by default. Well, the last radio button in the list is partially invoiced jobs. Okay, and then in this case, right at the bottom, 4072 is my partial invoice. Okay, now one of the caveats, and I get this question every once in a while, I'll hear people will come into this list and they won't see the job number in the open jobs list, or they won't see it in the partially invoiced jobs. Usually what happens there is they haven't posted the first invoice yet. That first invoice does have to be posted in order for it to fall in this list here.
Okay.
Okay. Once that invoice has been posted, you'll see it here, and then you can, of course, highlight it. You can view the partial if you want. It'll let you see what the first invoice was.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to see what was done previously. And then if you're going to do multiple partials, you can continuously just hit the partial invoice button again, and that will, effectively keep this checkbox checked for you. Or you can just simply hit the invoice button, and that will kind of flag it as a final invoice. Okay, and then the checkbox is unchecked.
Okay.
Okay. And then from here, you would, of course, do the same thing. In this case, I had shipped 2,500 before. So in this case, I would mark it as, I'm shipping 2,500 in this case. Once I tab through, it recalculates the line for me. And now I can recalculate by component to get my sales distribution to match. And it's looking for a tax jurisdiction, so I can just say that's going to be exempt and say OK. And if you need to add any additional lines or any freight postage handling, you could certainly do that here as well.
Okay.
And then, of course, you just save it and post it just as normal.
Great.
Okay. Does that answer your questions?
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for watching this episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Chris Costa.
And I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
Please look forward to more to come.